objects were filmed by NBC. NBC, the television network, said they had to be checked by an independent company of metallurgists. So some samples were sent to an independent company of metallurgists, and when they examined the objects, they said they could not explain how they could have formed naturally in the layers of the earth, because that's one possible explanation. They're just natural objects.
Sure.
They said they could not see how they could have formed naturally in the layers of the earth, especially the parallel grooves that go around, the center of each object.
Yeah.
So that would suggest they were made by some kind of being with human-like intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, another counter-explanation that some people will give is, well, again, that somehow or other they really weren't from the layers of rock that are 2 billion years old. But I went to South Africa, and in Johannesburg I had a meeting with the chief mining engineer from the mine from which these objects come, and he showed me a solid block of rock from this mine with these round objects solidly embedded in the rock, and with the grooves you could see, like, the round object would be partially protruding from the layer of rock, and the parallel grooves, you could see them going back, into the rock, around the object, back into the rock. So these objects definitely are part of the layers of rock in which they were found, which are about 2 billion years old. Now, I mean, perhaps in the future somebody will come up with a very good natural explanation of how these things could have formed naturally in the layers of rock, but until that time, I think we have to consider the very real possibility that these objects were made by someone with human-like intelligence over 2 billion years ago.
That's fascinating, and these aren't the only things, because in a way it's kind of it's one thing to only find, I guess, bones and skulls and those types of findings, but when you find evidence of a bit more advanced civilizations, that's when it becomes really interesting and really tickling in a way. There are I guess even coins find in Illinois.
Well, there was a coin-like object that came from a place in the state of Illinois in the United States. At this place, they were drilling a well, and the well boring went down over 100 feet, and at about the level of 114 feet, the drill brought up a copper object, round copper object, with some strange script on it and human figures on it. It looked like a coin, exactly like a coin. Now, what we did is we had the record of the drilling of the well, which stated we went down through 2 feet of topsoil, through 3 feet of sandstone, through 4 feet of clay, we had the whole drilling record down to the level where the coin was found. So what we did is we submitted that drilling record to geologists of the state of Illinois, and we asked them, well, how old is the level at the 114-foot level? And they said that level at that place is about between 200,000 and 400,000 years old. Now that's very, very interesting, because according to standard history, the oldest coins are only about 3,000 years old. They come, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years old. They come from, Asia Minor, what's now Turkey, the Mideast. So to have evidence for coins at between 200,000 and 400,000 years ago is really pretty amazing, because if you have coins, that means you have some kind of developed economic and political system. And it's interesting that there were other reports of discoveries that were made in the same region that showed evidence for ships. They had evidence for sailing ships that were found in layers of similar age right in the same location.
Yeah.
So that would suggest that you had some kind of developed civilization that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago with coins, some kind of economic and political system. Now that's very unusual because according to the usual story, the standard story that we see in the history textbooks, civilization came into existence only about less than 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the history books need to be rewritten.
And I mean, it must be very difficult also in a way to find these kinds of objects or artifacts. I mean, there could be, if you think about that, there could be an endless amount, of artifacts and potential, evidence of more technological civilization before ours, but simply because of the fact, that you don't drill everywhere, as it were, and I guess these findings only come about in a fluke, accident. I guess they stumble upon these, or
yes. Well, I think one reason, there are a few reasons for that. Just naturally, we have to expect that the further you go back in time, the less evidence you're going to find, because geologists tell us that because such evidence is going to be found in what's called layers of sedimentary rock. And geologists tell us just by natural processes of erosion and things like that, gradually these layers get destroyed and mixed up and things like that. So the further back in time you go, the less evidence you're going to find. And another problem is that scientists generally find what they're looking for. They have some particular idea in mind. They go to some particular location to try to find something. So one problem today is that not many scientists are actually systematically looking for evidence of advanced civilizations in very, very ancient layers of rock. And I think that's one problem. One thing I'm trying to do with my work is open the minds of a new generation of researchers so that they will start systematically looking for such evidence. And I think when they start doing that, more of it will start coming to light. Another problem is that many of the high-tech kinds of artifacts don't survive very well over vast periods of time. For example, most metals will oxidize. Plastics will dissolve, things like that. Say if there were a civilization that existed 100 million years ago that had laptop computers. well, then we would have to think, well, what's a laptop computer going to look like after 100 million years? It's not going to look like the one that's sitting on your desk.
That's right.
It's as I said, most of the metals will normally oxidize unless they're in some very special situation where they won't oxidize, and it might not look very much like what you see on your, if there was a computer, it might not look very much like what you see on your desk today.
That's right.
It may look like a piece of gum squashed on the sidewalk or something.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and that may be one reason why some of the ancient objects, very ancient objects that are found are made of gold, because gold doesn't oxidize. That's one reason why we consider gold to be a very valuable metal. It doesn't oxidize. It doesn't decay like other metals do. So there was an interesting case of a discovery that was made in the United States. It wasn't reported in a scientific journal. It was reported in a newspaper called the Morrisonville Times. And it told of a woman who was putting a big piece of coal into a coal-burning stove. And she broke the piece of coal in half and inside found a gold chain 10 inches long.
Mm.
And by examining that report, we could tell what mine the coal came from. So we found out that the coal in that mine was about 300 million years old. So that's a very, very interesting discovery.
Wow.
And although it wasn't made by a scientist, it wasn't reported in a scientific journal, there was another case of a human skeleton that was found in the same state, the same region of the United States. This was a discovery that was reported in a scientific journal called The Geologist. A human skeleton was found 90 feet below the surface of the ground in Macoupin County in the state of Illinois in the United States. And the layer of rock in which it was found is again about 300 million years old. So you also had a human skeleton reported from a layer of rock the same age as the layer of rock that this gold chain was found in. But I think that's one reason why some of the very ancient discoveries are gold objects, because gold preserves longer than other metals.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. One thing also that comes to mind, of course, is if human beings were, alive back then and might even were to some degree, developed or civilization-wise, so to speak. What about dinosaurs? Do you think humans and dinosaurs were, actually walking together at some point in the history?
Well, yes, I do. Of course, the discoveries I talked about just now are from before the time of the dinosaurs.
Yeah,
so I think humans were there before the time of the dinosaurs. They were there during the time of the dinosaurs. And now we're still here.
Yeah.
And actually, dinosaurs are still here, too. I mean, what's a dinosaur? A dinosaur is a big, dangerous reptile. So there are still big, dangerous reptiles.
Yeah.
That exist on Earth. There are crocodiles, alligators. They're big, dangerous reptiles. And there have even been some sightings in Africa, the Congo region, where some researchers report that perhaps some of the classic types of dinosaur creatures are still with us today.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a very controversial topic.
It is.
But as far as most scientists today are concerned, the dinosaurs became extinct about 65 million years ago when a huge comet hit the Earth and caused their extinction. But there is evidence that humans existed at the same time as these dinosaurs. Some of the evidence takes the form of footprints of humans and dinosaurs found in the same layers of rock. There was a case that I didn't mention in Forbidden Archaeology because I really wasn't too certain about it at the time. This is the case of human footprints and dinosaur footprints that are found in the same layers of rock in a place called Glen Rose, Texas, in the bed of the Paluxy River. Now, originally, these footprints, human footprints and dinosaur footprints, were reported by a Christian creationist scientist named Henry Morris, and he later withdrew his claims. He later said, "Well, I'm mistaken. They're really not human footprints at all. They're just dinosaur footprints that have been eroded, so they look like human footprints." So for that reason, I didn't mention these discoveries in my book, Forbidden Archaeology. But later, there was an archaeology student from a university in Texas who wrote to me and said, "Mr. Cremo, is there anything I can do to help out with your research?" And I told this archaeology student, I told her, "Well, why don't you go to this Glen Rose site in Texas and tell me what you think about those footprints as an archaeology student?" So she went there, and there were some researchers there who were conducting new excavations, and she participated in the excavations. She said that new human footprints were uncovered in these excavations, and as far as she could tell, as